Good morning and welcome. Let's take a look at the top story we are tracking for you. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden held their first in-person talks at the White House in what was the biggest bilateral meeting of Modi's US trip. Now, the Biden-Modi camaraderie was on full display throughout the press briefing. The leaders shared a light-hearted banter about the Biden surname in India and recollected their last meetings from 2014 and 2016. Apart from the light-hearted moments, the leaders spoke about their appreciation for each other and the strong relationship between India and America.
I think that the relationship between India and the United States, the largest democracies in the world, is destined to be stronger, closer, and tighter, and I think it can benefit the whole world. And I think that's begun to come to pass, and today we're launching a new chapter in the history of U.S.-Indian ties and taking on some of the toughest challenges we faced together, starting with a shared commitment to ending the COVID pandemic.
Sources tell WION that Prime Minister Modi and President Biden's bilateral meeting lasted for 1.5 hours instead of the scheduled 1 hour. Such was the depth of topics covered that Biden said that the next time they meet, it should be scheduled for over 2 days. Prime Minister Modi also signed the visitors' book in the Roosevelt Room of the White House. On the agenda were 3 main issues: COVID, climate, and the Quad. Now, the shared interests and common goals of both the nations are expected to be further enhanced after this bilateral meet.
भारत और अमेरिका के बीच ट्रेड का अपना महत्व है और इस दशक में ट्रेड के क्षेत्र में भी हम एक दूसरे को काफी पूरक हो सकते हैं। बहुत सी चीजें हैं जो अमेरिका पास है, जो भारत को जरूरत है, बहुत सी चीजें भारत के पास है जो अमेरिका के काम आ सकती हैं। तो ट्रेड भी इस दशक का एक बहुत बड़ा क्षेत्र रहेगा।
In a tweet after the bilateral meet, Modi called the meeting outstanding. He said, and I quote, "I had an outstanding meeting with President Biden. His leadership on critical global issues is commendable. We discussed how India and the USA will further scale up cooperation in different spheres and work together to overcome key challenges like COVID-19 and climate change," unquote.
और राष्ट्रपति जी जैसे कुछ विषयों का आपने उल्लेख किया, ये सारे विषय बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण हैं, भारत के लिए भी महत्वपूर्ण है। और आपने पदभार संभालने के बाद चाहे कोविड हो, क्लाइमेट हो या क्वाड हो, हर एक में एक बहुत ही यूनिक इनिशिएटिव लिया है। और मैं समझता हूँ ये जो आपका इनिशिएटिव है आने वाले दिनों में बहुत बड़ा प्रभाव पैदा करेगा। और मुझे विश्वास है कि आज की हमारी बातचीत में भी इन सारे विषयों को हम विस्तार से विचार विमर्श करके हम कैसे साथ चल सकते हैं, हम एक दूसरे के लिए भी और दोनों मिलकर दुनिया के लिए भी क्या कुछ पॉजिटिव कर सकते हैं। मुझे विश्वास है कि आपके नेतृत्व में आज की चर्चा बहुत सार्थक रहेगी।
For more on this, we are being joined by commentator on strategic affairs, Dave Ramaswamy. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us on this broadcast. Now, what do you make of the first in-person meeting between India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden, especially as the President Biden described the meeting as the beginning of a new chapter in India-US strategic partnership?
Well, thanks for having me. Actually, India enjoys a strong bipartisan appreciation and relationship with the United States, and not just because President Biden is in office. So it just builds on a continuity which has been put in place since President Clinton in the 90s, followed by President Bush, President Obama, President Trump, and now President Biden. And especially in the wake of the pandemic and the key role played by India to export its medical expertise, specifically in vaccines, to the rest of the world, that's seen very positively. And also, since India is the world's biggest democracy and America is the world's oldest democracy, I think India and the US share a lot of natural partnerships in terms of innovation, inspiration and just the idea of both countries where entrepreneurship and, the freedom to practice not just your religion and faith, but also freedom to practice your expertise and skills to build a better life. So India and the US, outside of the presidential and prime minister relationship, which is good, and it's just been built on over the last 20 years. And what's not mentioned is the key role that the Indian diaspora in America has played in this partnership. If you remember earlier this year when India was facing a big COVID crisis, a lot of oxygen equipment, other equipment was required from not just neighboring countries, from also the United States. The Biden administration was actually a little gun shy. They were slow on the ball, if you will. But there was a substantial Indian diaspora working in the Biden administration, the Indian American community, and also like 4 million Indian Americans spread all across the United States. They played a key role in rallying the U.S. government's support to India at that critical juncture. And, that just goes to show that outside of the relationship which exists between the heads of state, there's a deep-seated, abiding relationship that exists in our two countries, between our two peoples.
Right, absolutely, Dave. Now, India has moved away from its policy of non-alignment, and with the Quad has really allied itself more closely with the United States. Do you think that this closer alliance with the US will be beneficial for both nations in the long run?
Yes, I think so. And one of the key things coming out of the pandemic is the disruption of the supply chains, not just in India and the United States, but different parts of the world. And to give your viewers and listeners a better idea, I like to say the lockdowns, these economies which went into lockdown, the economy stops like a car, but starts like a train. So as the economies, not just India, the United States, were coming out of these lockdowns, what we found was a lot of the containers, which are at ports, which are on top of trucks, were kind of messed up, where they were spread in different parts of the world. And right now in the United States, we're facing a problem where ordering anything like a white good, appliances, home goods, roofing material, carpeting material, the delay is between 2 to 4 months, okay? And I'm sure India is facing a similar problem. And I've read articles where the Indian shipping companies have decided they're going to make containers in India as opposed to relying on containers made in China. So what the Quad will do is, I think, provide a framework where the supply chain realignment, which needs to happen, will happen. And more importantly, the over-reliance on one supplier, that is China, specifically in pharmaceutical equipment, medical equipment, the Wuhan lab, which was a source of where this pandemic spread around the world, COVID-19, is China's pharmaceutical hub. But what the Quad alliance does, or at least it formalizes a delinking of the supply chains away from China, and also de-risking the supply chains to more democratic countries, the Quad being the leading democratic powers in the world. That is America, the United States, India, Japan, and Australia. So I think it's a net positive for both the Indian and American people.
Right.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.